Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the latest Same Old Arsenal podcast. This is our summer series. It is one in, one out, one bangs. We are on episode 7. Thank you to everybody who is joining us live. Lovely to have so many people in. Pop your name in and say hello in the comments. Say hello to my guests as well. I'll introduce those in a second. If you've got any questions, you should all know the format by now. But if you don't know the format, I will explain it in a minute. But before I do that, let's get cracking with introducing my 2 wonderful guests for this evening. I'm going to start with the man in the top right-hand corner, Charles Watts, journalist and very, very good writer, and somebody who has written quite an interesting book, which he's going to tell us about in a second before we get cracking. Charles, how you doing, mate? You all right?
I'm very good, Chris. How are you, mate? Thanks for having me on.
It's lovely to have you on. It's lovely to have you on. So, but before I introduce Dave, I was just saying to you you both offline, I feel like I'm the odd one out here because I'm the only one that hasn't written a book. So do you want to just tell our listeners about the book that you've written? Because I think it's quite an interesting one, actually, and definitely a topical one at the moment.
I hope it's an interesting one. Yeah, it's called Revolution, The Rise of Arteta's Arsenal. And as the title suggests, it's kind of a story of the journey that the club have been on from when Mikel took over to where they are right now, with a little bit about his time as a player at the club as well, and him moving off and heading off to Manchester City and sort of cutting his teeth with Pep and all that, and then getting into the meat and sort of the neat and gritty of it all at Arsenal. So it was a lot of fun to do. It was a lot of stress to do as well. When we kind of started planning it, myself and the publishers, obviously we were kind of hoping it was going to have the perfect ending, the glorious ending of lifting the title. But when we started it, we always said, look, whatever happens, if they don't win it, this is something we're still going to do. It wasn't, dependent on them winning the league. Obviously that would have been nice, but it was about, I think we both kind of agreed, myself and the publisher, that, it's been such a story. There's been so much going on, so much happening, ups, downs, drama, and then just this kind of rebirth of Arsenal, really, that over the last couple of seasons, we've all loved and enjoyed and experienced at the stadium, off the pitch as well. And it kind of tries to encapsulate all of that around the kind of, just like I said, it's not just about what happened on the pitch, but what's happened off the pitch as well, and the sort of energy that has been built up at the stadium and within the squad and within the club in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Do you know what I think's an interesting part, which we as Arsenal fans don't really get exposed to, is that period of time when he was at Man City and where he did a lot of his formative learning. So that's quite an interesting one from my perspective, because I've seen the All or Nothing Man City documentary, but you only see just little snippets of him, don't you? So you just see little glimpses of the man that he's then evolving into being and where we're at the moment. So interesting one.
Yeah, and he's a really interesting character, and I think Arsenal are very lucky to have him, and I think we're really beginning to see the quality he has, and I think the squad he's built, the way he's just sort of taken control of the club it was a club that needed someone to take control of it again, because it had just been allowed to drift, and we all experienced it. We were all there at the end of Arsene, and even during Unai, who did his best, but it was never really going to work with Unai. It wasn't a fit. This is a fit. It does fit. And the way he's taken control of the club and the direction he's taken it in, with help, Eddie's done great. The owners have done great. There's just the alignment that's kind of come back to things at Arsenal, which has been really important, because that just wasn't there. There was infighting, there was a battle for power, all the stuff that kind of happened with Ivan, with Raul, which is all covered in the book as well. But now everything.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, but now it just feels aligned, doesn't it? You've gone through that period where we were all just like, what is going on? Who's making the decisions? Ivan was there. You thought he was going to, when Arsene went, Ivan was going to take control. Then suddenly he does a runner off to Italy, and Raul sort of seizes control and wins the power battle, and all of that. It just felt it was such a mess behind the scenes. And now suddenly you look at it, and you look at all the other clubs around England, really, at the moment, or certainly most of them, and you just think everyone must look at Arsenal just with a real sort of sense of jealousy that they've just got their place in order now. And that a lot of that is down to Mikel and the direction and his determination to see this project through, that he arrived and spoke about in his first interview with the owners. So yeah. Hopefully that all comes across in the book.
Yeah, lovely. And just quickly before I move on to Dave and his book, where can people get it? Is it an Amazon thing or is it somewhere else they can
It's
get it as well?
everywhere. It's everywhere. It doesn't come out till August 31st, so it's only available on pre-order now. You can obviously pre-order it from Amazon, from WH Smith, and then once it's published, it will be available from those places, but also in bookshops as well. And there'll be a couple of launch events, book signings, that sort of thing that are yet to be announced, but will be taking place. And so lots of places to get it. So yeah, please do.
Nice. Brilliant stuff. And Dave, you are also a published author of multiple books too. What's the latest one?
The latest one is the one that celebrates the 20th anniversary of the Invincible season, which is something actually I was going to write after I wrote the 2018 book about the double-double. But, circumstances, situations, personal stuff took over. And as it happened, it's probably a good thing because this is the perfect time to be writing about the Invincibles' 20th anniversary. So, yeah, it's me teaming up with Poorly Drawn Arsenal again. I'm not allowed to say his real name because most people don't know his real name. He's just Poorly Drawn Arsenal. But, brilliant illustrator that most people know. He works with Arseblog and Arsenal Vision now. I like to think I discovered him in 2017 when I asked him to illustrate the last book. But, so it's the every single game, pre-season, summer transfer window, and every game of the 2003-2004 season told in rhyming couplets with brilliant illustrations from Poorly Drawn Arsenal.
And just before we get to the main crux of the show then, did you have a particular section which you enjoyed the most?
To be honest with you, the reason why I enjoyed this one so much more, and I didn't know this until I started writing it, was because obviously the double-double, it's like we did the double again. It was just factual, and it was I just relayed each game in rhyming couplets and with the illustrations. But this one, even though everyone knows the story, the joy was as you progress through the 38 games, I was always doing it in context with where Chelsea were, where Man United were, where we were. So even though you know the end game, it's still putting it in context of, there were many times in that season where we were nowhere near top, or we were several points behind, and then we were ahead, and then we were behind, and then we had big games. And it was just building to that crescendo. And there's almost like two crescendos, because there's a crescendo of winning the league at White Hart Lane, which is obviously fantastic. And then there's the will they, won't they? But the backdrop, which I loved, and I really played to, is the fact that the whole media and the whole football world laughed at Arsene Wenger when he said 2 years before we'd do it, that we could do it. And so I'm always hearkening back to, are we going to? Were they laughing at us? Are they still laughing at us? Oh, are they? It's that, that whole ridicule that the club got and Arsene got for saying that it was possible. And bringing that all to a head at the end in an epilogue, which is I loved it. Yeah, so I loved doing the last one, but this one was special because it's just such a unique achievement. And I know we're still waiting 20 years later, and hopefully we can celebrate the 20th anniversary with winning the Premier League title again.
Well, that'd be nice.
We're looking at a pretty good situation to do it.
Yeah. So just quickly, just before we get into the main bits, where can people find that?
Well, it's similar to Charles, it's not out till September, but we're doing a pre-launch thing as well. So Legends Publishing, all over my social media, and there will similarly to be launch events in September. But I've deliberately, I could have easily brought this out in August, but respect to Charles, because his is a bigger and more important book, so I didn't want to. So I left a month. I left a month in between the book that people want to buy with the book that they've got a little bit of spare cash left they might frivolously buy. Yeah, so no, there will be launch events similarly to Charles, but not till a month after.
All right, okay, and that's the sole reason. Yeah,
right. Charles. I did ask Charles months ago. So
he did. Absolute gentleman.
I didn't want to. Not that my book's a threat to Charles's, but what's the point of having two great books coming out at the same time? Silly.
Well, so I've got you on. We talked a little bit about the books, but premise for this evening's, the next sort of 20, 25 minutes is our summer series, one in, one out, one bangs. So concept is, no, you don't do that. He's already in. That doesn't count.
What do you mean? Oh, damn it.
Concept is that you've just saved Mikel Arteta's life, and he's granted you two wishes, and it's an opinion piece. And so the first bit is you can have any. Mikel Arteta says, look, I've got a direct dial to Stan Kroenke. He's already given me 200 million quid, so I can get whatever I want. So you get to choose any footballer you want. And we're into series. This is episode 7. Just to give you a bit of a background on what we've had. So Johnny Cochran from the Arsenal Opinion podcast has gone for Vlahovic as his striker in. Kaya Kainak went for Ivan Toney. Interesting one there. We've had Ivan Toney as well from Akil. Merv Dinnan went for Harry Kane, which was contentious. Very contentious. Merv Dinnan. Erling Haaland we've had from Paul Hepker, Invincible. Mike McDonald went for Rasmus Højlund. Sounds like he's on his way to United, though. We've had Ferguson from Brighton. We've had 2 Fergusons from Brighton. We had a Victor Osimhen from Was last week.
So,
not that I want to lead the witness. Not that I want to lead the
witness. Strikers, or has everyone only gone for a striker so far?
It feels like everyone's gone for striker. So I'm really interested to get your opinions, lads. I'm really interested to get your opinions. So for our one in for the night, I'm going to start with you, Charles. You've got your pick. Mikel Arteta has said, you can have who you want. I'll make sure he's arriving in Colney in the morning. Who are you going for?
I think I'm going to be really boring now listening to all those ones. And I think I've overthought it, and I'm sort of putting it into perspective of where I think the squad is at the moment. And I think I'm looking at this squad right now. If Arsenal need to improve anything, they have to sign or replace someone who can cover for Bukayo Saka. I think it's so important, and they can't have another season where they're just literally flogging him into the ground, playing every single minute of every single game. So I'd be signing Rafinha from Barcelona. He's a player I really liked. I thought he showed so much personality when he was at Leeds. He's done it in the Premier League. He's proven he's done it at the Premier League. And I think he'd come in, he would compete, he would provide competition. It would give you the opportunity to rest Saka as much as you wanted. And you got a top quality right winger who could come in and fill the void left by him. And so that is, as much as I would love an Erling Haaland or something like that, I honestly think, and I'm going to speak about this a little bit later, that Gabriel Jesus is set for a really good season this season. So I'd be all over signing a right winger and giving Saka some much needed competition and cover. So yeah, Rafinha for me.
That's a really interesting one. I got really excited when we were in for him. Was that last summer or the summer before? I can't
last
remember.
summer.
Yeah, last summer.
I got really excited on that one. And it's one of those that it built up slowly. So when I first heard about it, I was like, well, I don't watch a lot of Leeds. So I started to watch a few sort of clips and stuff. And when I started to watch it, I thought, this guy's good. And he wanted that Barcelona move. I mean, having said that this is a free hit game of you can pick anyone you want, I do obviously love to throw the odd curveball in. Do you think he would want to come if money wasn't the object?
If money's not, you said money's not an object. I'm offering him 500 grand a week now. So yeah, I think he'd come.
The project is exciting though.
It's a touch of realism thing, isn't it? Everyone talks about it's a squad game, cover players, you've got to give Saka a rest, blah, blah, blah. That's like coming to centre forward to understudy Harry Kane, isn't it, at Tottenham?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
You can't do it. You are talking about the best right-sided midfield player winger probably in Europe right now, if not the world. And you're talking about an £80 million player coming to understudy him. I'm a bit old school. I can't deal in the lack of reality about that. However confident Rafinha is in his own ability, he can't believe he's better than Bukayo Saka. So you're talking about asking a player who's a Brazilian international to come to be a player who's going to play 15, 20 games a season and come on as a sub. Just crazy.
But then I think
we are supposed to be suspending reality, so fair enough.
But then I think you look at Ben White as well. I think Ben White's been arguably the best right back in England for a year, maybe with Kyle Walker up there. And yeah, Arsenal got out and spied spent 40 odd million on someone who could potentially replace him. I think Mikel, it's so important this summer is just building that top 16, 17, 18 players in the squad up rather than the starting 11 to give him the option to rest and rotate. And, that's where Arsenal fell off last season, was when key players got injured, the drop off was too big. The ones coming in. And I think if you can get up that 16, 17, 18 where there's just barely any drop off, basically Man City, isn't it? You can do what you want. You can rest players, bring someone in and the quality doesn't drop. And I look at the whole squad and I just think that's the one area. If something, God forbid it doesn't, if something happens to Bukayo, and I think he's been so lucky that it hasn't yet in the last few years. If something does happen, he's out long term. I think Arsenal struggle at the moment in that squad.
Yeah, I mean, they're talking about Reece Nelson being that understudy, but I've always thought Reece Nelson is more from the left.
Mikel likes him on the left, yeah. I don't think Mikel sees him as Saka's sort of replacement. I think he sees him much more on the left.
Do you think the club will actually ask you this, Dave, and then I go back to Charles. Do you think the club is looking hard at a right winger? Because it's all gone a bit quiet now. Because we've just spent 200 million.
Well, we've seen a lot of links the last couple of days about Mohamed Kudus, obviously from Ajax, who can very much play in that position. £40 million for a player who's a regular for Ajax would look like a sensible piece of business if it's possible, because he can play anywhere across the line behind the striker, and definitely could play, in Saka's role.
Yeah.
I also think, I know based on Nuremberg and what I know about where he was at Man City, the question is, if we sign another striker, is Gabriel Jesus the obvious replacement for Saka on the right? I'm not saying he's a similar sort of player, but we know that 2 years ago he was literally the go-to player for Pep in the Champions League. Every time it was an important game, he played Gabby Jesus on the right. So we haven't done it much, but we can do it. And I don't think there's a huge quality drop-off if we do that. So I would probably favour the decision on Nketiah and Balogun or a replacement, and look at Jesus as the cover for the horrible situation that Charles described with Saka, which we obviously hope doesn't happen.
Which nobody wants.
That would be my take.
Yeah. So actually, Dave, let's move on to your one in then.
Well, honestly, I've been thinking back in my brains all day, and I don't want to be boring, but I really, really am struggling with, I don't want to sort of throw out £1 million, multi-million-pound player for the sake of it. But I do agree that the one area we have to address is the drop off if Saka's not there, or the ability to rest him. And I do think Mohamed Kudus is, if we can, he's been linked with Brighton and other clubs, but we know the quality of players at Ajax. We know the technical ability is exactly what Arteta likes, and the ability to play in multiple positions. So he looks like an Arteta type of signing to me. So I would be very happy with that signing as a cover for Saka. But I accept what Charles is saying about Nelson, but I do sometimes think, and again, I'm not Arteta and I can't change his mindset, but I sometimes get frustrated when we're not doing well in games that we are inverted wingers all the time. And I sometimes look at it and think, oh, Gabby, Saka, swap wings for a bit, just change it up a bit and give the opposition defence a different problem. And I do think that if he's stuck with Reece, he's given Reece a big contract, whilst he prefers him on the left. I do wonder whether that is an option. And because I like the idea of changing the dynamics during a game, and that's one issue with Arteta sometimes is that we never do that. Even when we make changes, and he's very set in the way he plays. And I hope the bigger squad and the quality signings gives him that ability. But I do think Reece can do a job on the right, and sometimes I think when I see Martinelli always cutting in and never taking on the fullback, he's got better at it. But I think, well, wouldn't it be nice, to be old-fashioned wingers now and again and just beat the fullback and cut it back?
Yeah,
and
Woz did say last week
Reece would give you that option, even if it's in the last 20 minutes of the game, just to change the dynamics if things aren't going well.
Well, Woz did say last week that was his one to bang, and he showed signs of improvement last season. So you never know. It's just he hasn't been used there, and as Charles said, I feel like Arteta prefers him on the left, but we never know. Charles, just don't want to cut you out of this. Just sort of final thoughts before we go into the one out bit. Do you think Arsenal are going to look hard at that right winger spot? They must do, really, surely. If they went for Rafinha last year and it's gone a bit quiet, what do you think?
Yeah, I think they will look. I think the focus now is very much switched to getting players out. I think it needs to. They've done the business that they really wanted. They've got the 3 players in they really wanted, which is fantastic news. And now they have to look at moving some players out. Just shelled out 200 million quid after another previous couple of summers where they've spent loads of money and brought basically none in. So they have to try and get some players out now. I think that's definitely going to be the focus. But I do think as we get later on in the window, once, hopefully they've got a couple of players out and brought some money in, that they'll definitely reassess and have another little look before you get, before the end of the window. So yeah, I do. I'm not saying for definite they will sign someone, but I do think they're definitely going to have a look, and that is an area that they are targeting.
Yeah, definitely.
Of course, they will have had 2 or 3 games to look at the internal solutions and Marquinhos again, won't they? Before the end of the window. So
I'd be very. I think Marquinhos will go out on loaning. I think he's far too early.
No, I was thinking more of the Enweres and the Lewis Kelly, the younger players who obviously are going to get a chance in the next few games.
Yeah, someone can stand up and make a name for himself in the summer. Then it will give him a decision to make.
Yeah, 100%. Well, that's kind of a good segue then to the one out then. So you've had your one in. Mikel said, all right, there's Rafinha. Enjoy. Hope you enjoy him, Charles. You've brought him to the club. Well done. So let's look at the one out. Now, I make the assumption that you've got players like Cedric or Pepe that are probably going to go out, that it's probably a done deal. So you don't have to be the one that shunts them out the door. So just in terms of context, we've had a lot over the last few weeks of Eddie Nketiah's out. So I don't know how you feel about that, or whether or not you'd pick somebody else. We've had a couple for Partey, but we've had 4 or 5 people over the last few weeks that have gone for Eddie Nketiah out. And I don't know whether that's reflective of we need another striker or an attacker player in. But who's your one to leave?
Who's that, me?
Yeah, you, Charles.
Balogun.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I think just because, again, and I'm being a bit sort of realistic, I think here I'm looking at his contract situation. I'm looking at his value right now, how high it is, the interest that there in him. I just think if you don't sell him now and then he doesn't get as many minutes as he wants this summer, maybe he begins to sulk, maybe, he doesn't score many goals, suddenly his value's dropped. He's only got a year left next summer and you've missed out on the possibility of getting about 40, 50 million pounds in for a player. So I think sometimes you got to reluctantly sell someone, and I think this is the summer to sell Balogun. Very much try and protect yourself with whatever deal you do. Get a buyback clause in there that at a decent enough price, even if that means maybe taking £10 million off the asking price for him, if you can get a decent buyback clause included, to try and protect yourself. But for me, Eddie's got 4 years left on his deal. Balogun's got 2, and I can't move away from that contract situation. I think it just unfortunately is going to force Arsenal into selling, and I think this is the summer you have to really do that. So that's who I'm going for.
Yeah, and we've been accused of being poor at selling for so long that when you've got maximum value out of a young player that you can get, and as you said, if we protect ourselves, there's no real way of losing it, is it? Imagine if Inter Milan, apparently that's what I think Fabrizio Romano was talking about, that Inter Milan are interested in throwing in some, I know it's all speculation and hearsay, but they're interested in throwing in some clauses. So if they come in and say, we'll give you 35 million quid, but within the next 2 years, if he really explodes, then you can buy him back for 45 million quid, then you probably would do it, I'd imagine.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I'd do, especially if you're going to sell him to Inter. I think you probably have to do something like that because they haven't got the money that some of the Premier League clubs, if someone like a West Ham or an Everton, who I think would, absolutely crying out for a striker, come in and they've got Premier League money behind them and they're willing to go to what Arsenal want, which is around 50 million, it might be a little bit harder to negotiate a buyback clause at a decent fee. But if you're going to do it to Inter and accept a slightly lower fee, I think you definitely really try and push to get a good buyback clause and protect yourself. So yeah,
100%. Dave, would you are you on the Balogun exit train, or are you picking somebody else as your one out?
Everything Charles said, I completely agree with. He scored 15 goals in League One without penalties. So Lacazette scored over 20. Just tells you, I don't deny he's had a good season, but he's never done anything in the Premier League. So you've got to make a decision, and he's pretty much made the decision for himself. He said he won't go out on loan, and he's not gonna be a regular at Arsenal. So the decision's made for us. But throwing the other one in, I don't want to say this, and I hate the fact, but I think we have to sell Kieran Tierney, purely because I think he's such a great lad and he's a great footballer, and he deserves to play in a team that wants to play football the way his attributes will be appreciated, because they've been singly unappreciated at Arsenal. And that's not a criticism of anyone, but asking Kieran Tierney to play like Zinchenko is not fair. And I think most fans, even the ones who love Arteta, like the three of us do, would rather we changed the way we played when we had to play Tierney, and we didn't do that last year. So he's a great player. 3 years ago and 2 years ago, we probably didn't make Champions League because he was injured, and everyone thought the same. Everyone thought he was going to be our club captain, and suddenly he's the forgotten man. We all love him, but we all think he's never going to play. So if we can get £35 million for Tierney, then thank you very much. You've been a fantastic player for 3 years. I love you to bits, but go and enjoy the rest of your career, and let's make the money from you, because we definitely will make good money from Kieran Tierney.
Yeah, Charles, what's your thoughts on the KT stuff? Do you agree? Is it for me?
I do agree. I agree.
Injury stuff. That's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, but if he was fit last year and Mikel still didn't play him, he played Jakub Kivior instead of him. It's just, I never really understood it. And I think I just think you play Tierney and ask the team to play a little bit different, maybe, if he's playing, and to ask him to play that inverted role, it's just not him. And exactly like Dave said, I think it's just, if that's
but
going
he
to be
still
the case,
gave his all trying to do it, didn't he?
of course he did. 100%. Well, he's always going to do that, and that's the type of character he is and professional he is. But I agree. I think he just deserves to go out and play for a team that will play him. He's too good to be sitting on the bench. And I think he walks into most Premier League teams and improve them. Unfortunately, he's just at a team that do not set up or play a system that suits him at all. And so it's like the kind of Arsenal has moved on without Kieran Tierney under Arteta, unfortunately. And it is a shame, like Dave said, when we all thought he'd probably be captain at one point not too long ago. And now he's just sitting on the bench and got centre-backs playing ahead of him, or moving Tomiyasu over from right-back to play ahead of him. So I think as that comment there on the screen, I think he's been really, really unlucky in the way that the team has just evolved in the last couple of years. And unfortunately, that's just meant that there's just not really a place from him. So you got to cash in as well.
It's just football. It happens. Everyone looks back with rose-tinted glasses at Eduardo. Eduardo was injured when we played 4-4-2. When he came back, we played 4-2-3-1, and Van Persie was banging in 25 goals a season. We put him out on the left wing. He didn't like it. We sold him. It happens. It's football. Systems evolve, managers change. It just is what it is. We all wish him the best, but there is absolutely, even with this thing a few weeks ago, we might play a three at the back, but Keogh was going to play there. If we play three at the back, it's not going to be Tierney, is it? So even though he plays it for Scotland, we are not going to play him there. So
I mean, my hope is that ideally you want some sort of a bidding war going on, but there's so much noises around Newcastle, it just feels like that's almost inevitable.
Well, the noises are about him taking a pay cut to go back to Celtic as well. Which,
I can't see.
And I think if he went back there, he'd probably be made captain by Brendan Rodgers. So.
Yeah, well, I think that would be quite an extraordinary move, to be honest with you. I don't know how much money Celtic have got, but right, let's move on to the final sort of the question for next season. So right at the beginning, the reason I've chosen this and I started this series off with it is because I put a tweet out right at the beginning of last season saying I think Martin Odegaard's going to absolutely bang. And then when he's had the season that he's just had, I was very smug and decided I'm going to ask everybody to make their predictions. So you've got one player that you think, well, they're either already brilliant and they're going to go supernova, or maybe they come from a little bit of left of field and they go brilliant. And I'll go back to you, Charles, with that one. So just
I knew you were going to go to Charles first, and I know he's going to say what I'm going to say. Go on.
Well,
I'll be honest and tell you if it's the same player. Go on.
Well, I think I said it earlier on. I hinted at it earlier on.
I knew it.
Yeah, I think Gabriel Jesus. Jesus. Honestly, I think everyone's sleeping on how good Gavi Jesus is, and that the injuries lay off, and then he came back. He wasn't quite on it. Even though when he came off, he scored more goals in that little period than he did in the period where he played absolutely, genuinely world-class style football, which he didn't up until December. Excuse me. So yeah, I just think he's top quality. I think he's absolutely got the ability to be a 20-goal forward. I think we're gonna go back to seeing that Jesus nice and rested, who's going to be flying, who's going to be pressing from the start, and he was so transformative in that first half of the season before the injury. And I think a lot of people forget just how good he was in that spell. And I'm just hoping this summer, he's got his energy back. He's fully fit. He's ready to go. He's ready to make up for missing that big chunk of last season. And I think he's going to have an absolute worldie of a season. I really do.
Yeah, I find it quite. I'm with you. I find it really surprising how when he returned, people were all of a sudden like, "Oh, he's not as in form." I mean, he came back from a knee injury that he was out for quite a few months for. He missed half of a World Cup. He would have been absolutely gutted. He's joining back into a team we were just about purring. We managed to stay top of the league and just about. And I think it's probably fortune as well, because at that time, Man City were turning on the afterburners, weren't they? In terms of their run to the title, and so I think a lot of people suddenly saw the form that we were stuttering a little bit, and I've seen a few people that have linked sort of Gabriel Jesus to that as well. But I do hope too that he's really going to bang. Dave, was that your choice as well?
That was also, but also because if it's as we all assume that Declan is going to allow him to play Havertz and Odegaard, I think the Jesus we saw dropping in, picking the ball up in his own half and being everywhere, we won't see that. Even if he wants to do it, Arteta's going to be quite strict with him this year, and I think we're going to see a final third player. Now, that's not to say he's going to be a 6-yard box poacher. He'll never be that. And I think he'll interchange with Saka and he'll interchange with Martinelli. But I think what we won't see is the the man who feels like he has to be involved in the build-up play and dropping in and helping people out. So I think we'll see the 20 goals, 20 assists sort of player that I think he is. And we've got a lot more chance of seeing that this season, assuming he stays fully fit. So I totally agree with Charles. But I think the Havertz Odegaard dynamic with Rice behind, if that's what we believe and we all do, we'll see him much closer to the goal a lot more often as well.
Yeah, I think the Havertz thing is going to be a really interesting thing because it's a really aggressive move from Arsenal. I mean, they're obviously
even if you can't volley it into the goal, with a free hit.
Yeah, I mean, if they really are looking to be as aggressive as it sounds by playing Havertz, Odegaard, Martinelli, Saka, and Gabriel Jesus, then the expectation of Jesus might be that we need you further up the field, mate, because you're going to have lots and lots of supply lines there. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really, really interesting. Listen, we're just coming towards the end of today's pod, but we have got a couple of questions that I just wanted to pose to you guys. So let's do some quick fire bits. Does anyone know, Charles or Dave, any truth in the rumours of a Gabriel Jesus injury in training yesterday? I haven't heard anything about that. Have any of you guys heard anything?
I haven't at all, and I hope that's not right. That's literally the first I've heard of it. To be fair, I've been out on a golf course today, so I haven't obviously not following what's going on too closely in America, but I haven't seen any of the guys on the ground over there report that, unless I've missed it. So, no, hopefully not.
So we hope that that's a no. We hope that that's a hard no. Dave, quick question for you then. Where do you see ESR fitting in the 11?
Well, head or heart? Yeah, I mean, I generally think that we need to see him pushing to be involved on a weekly basis. And I think in himself, I hope he's confident enough to think that he can push for a starting place. And I think most fans won't believe that, but I think as a player, he may well believe that. And if he does believe that, I think the position he thinks he can challenge for will be the Havertz position. I can't see him going back out on the left, because we've again, people think, oh, it's Martinelli, Smith Rowe interchanging, and it was, but that was 2 years ago. Last year when he came on for Martinelli, it was the last 20 minutes, and even the year before, after January, Martinelli's changed the way we play, the team has changed the way we play, and I don't think Smith Rowe is a Martinelli type player. So I think the left 8 role is the one that he will be gunning for. But of course, he's now competing with Trossard as well, which is the other one we haven't spoken about, who's not really let us down wherever he's played. So, but I think the left 8, and I hope he'll push for it. We've spent £65 million on Havertz, but if in 3 months' time Smith Rowe's got his opportunity and taking it, people won't remember we spent £65 million on Havertz. They'll be gunning for the homegrown lad. Of course they will.
Yeah. I really hope that Smith Rowe has a good season. I really do. I agree with Dave. I think that left 8 role I think he's got all the attributes to play that role really, really well. My only worry is, I just hope Mikel gives him opportunities, because there was chances to get minutes into Emil in the second half of our season when he came out, and Mikel didn't, for whatever reason, didn't take those chances, and I thought that was a shame. So I hope he changes.
But he did do that with Martinelli, didn't he? After a long-term injury,
we
were all screaming for Martinelli to play 2 years ago, and he wasn't being played.
No, and so and we all know what happened there. So hopefully it follows. So my only worry is that left 8 role. It's kind of a worry, but it's also exciting as well. I think, because obviously I think Havertz is clearly being identified to play that role, but I think the signing of Declan Rice, who I know we've barely even talked about in the show, is just such a brilliant signing, by the way. Obviously he's going to play 6, but I think in those games away at the Etihad or at Anfield or Man United, as long as you keep Thomas Partey, which I hope they do, and then you've got the option of basically having Thomas Partey as a 6 and playing Declan Rice as that sort of 8 in those big away games. I think that's such an exciting sort of potential lineup there in terms of just dominating midfield. You've got 2 players who, and with Odegaard as well, who's so good at it. You've just got 3 players there in that 3 who just love turning over possession, winning the ball back in whatever area they're playing. And I think in those big away games against the top teams, I think that's a really exciting sort of.
I think sometimes, do you think, Charles, you might actually revert to the 4-2-3-1 in those games and actually play Rice and Partey as a 2?
He might do,
and revert to Odegaard as he was originally the 10 in the 3 rather than the sort of 2 8s.
He might do, and I think that's what all of these signings this summer. Basically, when you look at them, they all point to a slight shift in the system. We're also adjusted to this 4-3-3 that Mikel's been playing, but then you look at Timber, obviously that's very different to Ben White. You look at Declan Rice, he's very different to Thomas Partey, and you look at Havertz, he's very different for Xhaka. And if those three are just coming in basically for White, Partey, Xhaka, which we think they are the majority of the time, I think that kind of points potentially to a different looking Arsenal next season in terms of how they're setting up and the way they want to play. Because all three of those players, although they can play in those positions, I think they're going to bring very different qualities to the ones that they're replacing.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about the prospects for next season is that I have no idea how we're going to line up from game to game. And if I've got no idea, and I spend all of my time watching Arsenal, reading about Arsenal, listening to Arsenal, hearing comments from Mikel Arteta, how on earth are other teams going to be able to react to that? It's going to be a really, really interesting and quite a fun kind of hopefully quite a fun opening sort of start to the season. We need to start well. If we start well, then I'm going to be quite excited. And actually, when I talk about starting well, I'm even looking at these preseason games. Just perform well, just like we did last season, and everyone's going to be up for it. Right, we're going to wrap up now, but I want to do one final question. It's just a bit of an interesting one that I thought I'd pose for you both. All-time favourite manager. Now, I don't know whether that's Arsenal or whether that's just managers in general, but Dave, you can go first with this one, seeing as you moaned at me for picking Charles to go first on the last question.
My all-time Arsenal favourite manager?
Yeah, let's do that.
Obviously, it's got to be Arsene Wenger. I mean, for some people looking at me and know me and my age and everything will probably say I'd say George Graham. And different eras, but no, we all got a little bit frustrated at the end, but you look at what happened in the early part of his tenure, completely transformative and changed our club, and the way we were perceived around the world. So I would still say Arsene Wenger is my favourite Arsenal manager. As for managers generally, I mean, I don't look much outside of Arsenal, to be honest. So no, just Arsene Wenger.
I'm just going to repeat what Dave said. I'm going to repeat what Dave said. I love George. When I was a kid, when I first started supporting Arsenal, it was George Graham. I was, just caught Anfield '89. Thankfully, the '91, the double cup, the cup winners' cup, all of that. It was brilliant, and I loved it. But that era of Wenger, it was just so special. The first half of it, seeing those teams play the way they did it, the records they set. It was just, it was just so special with that group of players as well. And, I think I respect Arsene Wenger more than I respect most people. And like Dave said, it ended badly, should have gone earlier than he did. And it was a shame that it all sort of dragged on a little bit too long. But, he absolutely deserves the statue that he's getting at that stadium in a very, just in a few weeks' time. And just a special man.
Yeah. There's a really great book about some of those things he achieved as well coming out.
Oh my God!
I am looking forward to reading it.
And on that note, just before we go, just a quick one to remind you that we talked. Charles mentioned earlier about we haven't talked much about Declan Rice. There's a show that Mandy did earlier in the week where she got Alan Olga and a chap called Anthony, I think was a sports coach, along just to talk about what he brings. So if you want to listen in, you can obviously access our catalogue of stuff on YouTube. And then there was also the Gay Gooners piece, which Amanda did last weekend, which was really interesting as well. She's got a family show she's doing this weekend, which I think is at 4 p.m. So she's got some of her family members along. So if you want to join Amanda, you can do so on Sunday. That's it from me for today. Thank you very much to everyone in the chat. I'm sorry I couldn't get through to all of the questions. We had lots of interesting questions, but unfortunately we've all got to run. Charles, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris.
Dave, lovely to have you on, mate.
See you at Wembley.
See you at Wembley. And we will see you, Arsenal fans, next time on the Same Old Arsenal podcast. Cheerio, guys.
Thanks, Chris.